Why does the United States pay higher drug prices than other countries? Because America's the only country in the world where 340B hospitals mark up drug prices and PBM middlemen charge billions in hidden fees. Meanwhile, Americans subsidize the research and development for new cures. Other countries benefit, but don't pay their fair share. Crack down on the middlemen. End the free riding. Lower drug prices. Go to balancethescales.org to learn more. Paid for by Pharma.
You may get a little excited when you shop at Burlington.
What a low price! You see that? They have my favorite brand! It's like a whole new Burlington! I can buy two!
I'm saving so much!
Burlington saves you up to 60% off other retailers' prices every day. Will it be the low prices or the great brands? Burlington. Deals? Brands? Wow! I told you so. Styles and selections vary by store.
Hey, everyone. We recorded this show on the afternoon of Sunday, June 22nd. It's possible things shifted overnight. So, Greg, I'm going to ask you the most extreme version of a question I think a lot of Americans are thinking about right now. After this weekend, are we witnessing the beginning of World War III?
Absolutely not.
This is comforting, right? Because I don't know about you, but when I heard that President Trump had authorized our military to drop several 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs on Iranian nuclear facilities, my internal doomsday clock ticked forward a few seconds. Why are you so confident of that?
Because the Iranians can't really launch World War III. And as important it is in the Middle East, as we can see from the fact that the Russians, the Chinese, they're keeping their distance from this. No one is going to get into a full-fledged war with the United States over Iran.
This is Gregory Gause, by the way. He's a visiting scholar at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. You mean for this to be World War III, Iran would need some powerful allies?
It would need a great power ally, and right now it doesn't have one.
So what do these weekend strikes portend? As of my conversation with Greg, just one thing was clear. Whatever happens next, whether it is open conflict or just higher gas prices, the United States is going to own the result.
Oh, we chose to fight this war. That's for sure. I think that this was a choice that the Trump administration and that President Trump directly made, and against many of the things that he campaigned against from 2016 on. We didn't have to. The U.S. wasn't directly threatened by Iran, and we know that Iran really hadn't come close to developing nuclear weapons yet. They had stockpiled quite a bit of highly enriched uranium, which would be the basis for making a weapon. But U.S. intelligence was pretty clear on this.
You're making the evidence for going to war here or militarily intervening, you're making it sound like weak sauce.
Oh, yeah, I think it is. I fear that a likely result is that 3 or 4 years down the line, this regime in Iran, if it's still in power, will have nuclear weapons.
So we've gone in to try to get rid of nuclear weapons, and we've just made it more likely those nuclear weapons will exist?
I think it's highly likely that that will happen.
Well, that seems like a real cell phone.
Well, yeah. If this regime can survive this attack, it seems to me that they have every incentive to get nuclear weapons, because then they'll be like North Korea, right? Everybody hates North Korea, but nobody's going to attack them.
Today on the show, the reasoning behind this weekend's dramatic escalation in Iran, who it serves, who it doesn't. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Quince. The temperatures are rising and summer's approaching. If you are tired of looking at the same tank, same shorts, same everything, give your daily uniform a little upgrade with Quince. Quince sent me a couple other summer pieces, and honestly, I am wearing one of them right now. It's a super cute button-up shirt that came with matching shorts. Then there's a simple wrap dress they sent my way. Add a jean jacket to that, and it's a casual weekend fit. If you add a piece of jewelry, you can take it for a night on the town. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middleman, Quince gives you luxury without the markup. Like 100% European linen shorts and dresses from $30, luxe swimwear, Italian leather platform sandals, and so much more. Treat your closet to a little summer glow up with Quince. Go to quince.com/whatnext for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That is QUINCE.com/whatnext to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/whatnext. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. This process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. Okay, lay out exactly what we think happened over the weekend. What did the U.S. do?
So the Trump administration claims, or at least the president claims, that he was convinced by intelligence that the Israelis provided him that Iran was much closer to an actual nuclear weapons capability than American intelligence had reported. One could also argue that this was the kind of situation where President Trump, seeing that the Israelis seemed to be very successful in this first week of attacks, kind of wanted to get in on the action because although he likes to make deals, he also likes to be on the winning side.
Oof. Okay. So we sent bombers into Iran. And my understanding is, we made sure the Israelis were out of the way, but we weren't coordinating in an official sense with them. Is that right?
Well, President Trump was very clear last night. We and the Israelis are on the same team, and we coordinated with them. They didn't participate directly in our strikes, but their efforts in the past week to take down Iranian air defenses and to soften up the Iranians basically created the context in which America could make these strikes with relative impunity, relative safety for our planes and for our service personnel.
And the targets were uranium enrichment plants at Fordo and Natanz, stuff that was pretty deeply underground in some cases, and so needed a particular American bomb that could penetrate these facilities.
Yeah, that's correct. This was a capability that the Israelis didn't have, and we hadn't given it to them. So if they were going to finish the job, so to speak, they would need us to participate.
Do we know the extent of the damage yet?
No, we don't. We're getting various descriptions of this. President Trump last night said completely obliterated. The Pentagon briefing from the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs didn't use those terms.
What does that mean to you, that we seem to be getting two different answers here?
Well, it means we know that the president likes to exaggerate, and that might be the kindest way to describe his proclivity in that area. I think that what we can say without fear of contradiction is that this has set back Iranian nuclear ambitions, but we don't know to what extent. Is it months? Is it years? We just don't know.
The U.S. had been in negotiations to get another version of the nuclear treaty with Iran until just recently. And President Trump seemed to be seeing a military threat as part of the negotiation here. Trump is now saying stuff like, it's time for peace. Do you think Iranians are going to see it as time for peace?
Well, the problem is that I think Iranians and most of the world will see our negotiations with Iran during this period and President Trump's statement that he would decide on what to do next in a couple of weeks as a deliberate subterfuge, as a ruse, first to cover the Israeli attack of last Friday, the beginning of the Israeli campaign, and then to cover our attack. I think that you would be hard-pressed to find anyone outside of the United States who doesn't believe that the Trump administration wasn't lying to the Iranians in its intentions.
That doesn't seem good if you're a U.S. diplomat.
No, not in the least. And if your goal is to bring the Iranians back to the table to negotiate some kind of deal that will eliminate their nuclear enrichment capabilities, the fact that the Trump administration's credibility with Iran is even lower than it was before is not going to make that easy.
So if the regime in Iran were to choose a different path, retaliation for these attacks, what are their options here?
So it could attack American forces in the Gulf, our naval forces. We have military forces, ground forces in the Gulf at various bases in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Qatar. Those bases could be subject to attack. The Iranians could also attack the very small, limited American forces in Iraq and in Syria.
And I assume that the U.S. would then need to strike back because of that.
President Trump on Saturday night was very clear that if the Iranians escalated, the United States would respond in kind.
It really doesn't seem like Iran's regime is in a good position right now, because these attacks leave them pretty humiliated and looking weak in front of their people. You know, I saw one analyst basically saying that speculation about what Ayatollah Ali Khamenei might do next is wild because he's an 86-year-old man who's watching his decades-long strategy go up in flames, and he's in hiding. And that the real question might not be like what he does next, but when do the people around him stop listening to him? And what do they do instead? And who do they listen to now?
I don't see any evidence of that. I think in the short term, this regime, which has a lot of domestic opposition, and we've seen that manifested in protests at various times, most recently in 22-23, the Women, Peace and Freedom protests. I think in the short term, the regime is benefiting from a rally around the flag sentiment. There's a strong sense of Iranian nationalism, and the idea that foreigners are attacking Iran is just the kind of thing that could increase support for the regime, again, in the short term. We saw the same thing when Iraq attacked Iran back in 1980. The immediate post-revolutionary Iran was very divided as to which political direction to go. And the attack by Iraq helped the clerics and Ayatollah Khomeini consolidate his control. And I think Ayatollah Khamenei, the current supreme leader, remembers that very well.
Donald Trump and his advisors are being pretty clear that they don't want regime change as an end goal here in Iran. It's a little less clear to me what Israel wants here. And I do think there's also this other question of whether you want regime change or not. It's a little bit of an open question what these attacks make possible next. Is this kind of thinking useful, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's worth thinking through the scenarios that might occur if you have a severe weakening of the regime. But I would say that that's one of the, you can classify that as a low probability, high impact event. I don't think the Trump administration is after regime change because, you know, they've campaigned against regime change wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think it would be a bridge too far, even for President Trump, who is pretty shameless about changing his positions on things. And we know that there's a core in the MAGA base that is actually opposed to this involvement in the Israel-Iran war. The Israelis, I think, are a different story. they can't change the regime. I don't think you could change the regime from the air in any event. But the Israelis have been much more open about hinting that they would like regime change. Prime Minister Netanyahu went on television and broadcast into Iran, calling on people to rise up against the regime. The Israeli defense minister, after a recent exchange, a missile exchange that hit a hospital in Israel, said Khamenei has to go. So the Israelis, I think, have been pretty open that they would like to see this campaign lead to regime change.
I mean, friend of the show, David Faris, his take on what's happened over the weekend was that Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel has spent the better part of 2 decades trying to strong-arm the U.S. into war with Iran. And he finally found a president who was naive, even stupid enough to go along with it. I wonder what you make of that assessment.
Well, I'll agree with half of it, that I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu has wanted an American strike on Iran. He's opposed American diplomatic deals with Iran. And perhaps even this campaign against Iran, which began last week, had as at least one of its goals to try to prevent a political deal on the nuclear issue between Iran and the United States. Whether he tricked President Trump, I'm not so sure about that. I think he presented President Trump, who we know is well-disposed to Prime Minister Netanyahu, well-disposed to Israel, in his first term, gave Israel a lot of things Israel wanted. And he did that without a quid pro quo from Israel. I think the Israelis presented him with a situation where he thought there'd be an easy victory, and he took it.
Do you think it's going to be an easy victory?
I think that if you define the strikes as setting back Iran's nuclear ambitions for some months or a couple of years, you could define it as a success. But I think if at the end of President Trump's term, we see Iran close to a nuclear weapon or having obtained a nuclear weapon, maybe indirectly through dealings with North Korea, through Russia, then this would have to be labeled a failure.
After the break, how's all this going to go down over in MAGA world? This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's smart to always have a few financial goals. And here's a really smart one you can set: earning cash back on what you buy every day. With Discover, you can. Get this. Discover automatically matches all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year. Seriously, all of it. Discover trusts you to make smart decisions. After all, you listen to this podcast. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
This episode is brought to you by Built. Built is perfect for those looking to earn airline miles and hotel points just by paying rent on time. There's no cost to join, and just by paying rent, you unlock flexible points that can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. When you pay rent through Built, you unlock 2 powerful benefits. First, you earn one of the industry's most valuable points on rent every month. Second, you gain access to exclusive neighborhood benefits in your city. Built's neighborhood benefits are things like extra points on dining out, complimentary post-workout shakes, free mats or towels at your favorite fitness studios, and unique experiences that only Built members can access. And when you're ready to travel, Built points can be converted to your favorite miles and hotel points around the world, meaning your rent can literally take you places. Start paying rent through Built and take advantage of your neighborhood benefits by going to joinbuilt.com/whatnext. That's joinbilt.com/whatnext. Make sure to use joinbuilt.com/whatnext to sign up for Built today.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, just hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
After I got off the line with Greg, I called up David Faris, who I referenced in that conversation before. David's a political science professor at Roosevelt University. I wanted to get a sense of how this bombing was going over at home, given all the campaign promises President Trump made about avoiding military entanglements abroad. David said, keep in mind, lack of support from the American people is not really constraining this administration.
Well, the president has already taken a number of actions during his administration that I think that they know are unpopular. And they have so far been willing to simply weather the public relations hit and the hit to his approval ratings. I think that one of the things that they're gambling on is the sort of the MAGA magic. So whatever Donald Trump says should be done, eventually the hardest core supporters in his political movement will get on board and will eventually say within a week or two that they always supported striking Iran. Right. So I think the opinion polls that we're looking at right now, which show, 16 to 25% of Americans in favor of these strikes. I think the Trump administration is gambling, and I'm not sure that he's wrong, that he'll be able to bring his political movement along and turn those numbers around so that they look like just sort of moderately unpopular rather than something that's like pretty radioactive.
I mean, already we see Democrats in Congress saying that this action violates the War Powers Act. And before Donald Trump did anything, there were already people in Congress trying to take action to prevent the president from doing just this. And it's notable to me because I believe the justification coming from the administration is the War Powers Act. So like both sides are saying you're either prevented or like it's the reason we can do it. Like, is there someone who is right here?
Well, the War Powers Act has never really been adjudicated in a serious way. So the technical letter of the law in the War Powers Act suggests that the president can deploy military force by letting Congress know within 48 hours that it has started, as long as there's like an imminent threat to the United States or there's been an attack on the United States. And that's obviously not the case here. However, it's been a pretty long-running tradition since that act was passed in 1973 that presidents just kind of do whatever they want. Even if you could say, well, he's in violation of the War Powers Act. Well, who's responsible for enforcing that? And that would be Congress, right? Like you would impeach the president. And that's obviously not going to happen.
You know what struck me, though? Like, I'm old enough to remember the Iraq War. And in the Iraq War, the United States went to the UN with evidence of weapons of mass destruction. There was a whole long, drawn-out conversation about this. And the evidence was not correct. It was wrong. But there was a protest movement. There was like time. It just seemed like the administration felt like it needed to have a justification. And now, granted, it was a little bit different because that was an explicit war about regime change that we were initiating. And this is us joining Israel's military strikes. But still, if you look at, for instance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio this weekend going on the Sunday shows, and he's asked, like, can you detail the intelligence that is justifying this action by the United States? He basically waves it away. And he's like, don't need that. Don't need to tell you that, which is wild to me how far we've come.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the history of the Iraq War from the perspective of the war hawks, right? Like, I think that they look at that, 6 to 9 month period where the U.S. was building its case to the international community and going before the UN, trying to build public support for it. I think a lot of the people, even at the time, a lot of folks on the right and the far right regarded that as a waste of time. They were like, we should have just done what we were going to do and not bothered with the fig leaf of international law, not bothered trying to get the UN's permission for what we were going to do. I think it's pretty clear that the United States would not get that permission from the United Nations. I don't think there's any chance that Donald Trump would get an authorization for the use of military force through the U.S. Congress right now. And so I think that what he's doing is he's acting unilaterally because he knows that even those limited pathways that were used for the Iraq War are not available to him.
You know who's been a little quiet as of this recording on social media? And it surprised me. Tucker Carlson. because he spent the last week really beating the drum against the president and against the wider GOP for considering launching an attack on Iran. And I'm a little curious where you think this debate is going to go, because a few key figures like Tucker went really hard against what's just happened.
Well, I think one of the sort of reliable features of the Trump era is that when there has been an internal split within the Republican Party or within the MAGA movement, whatever side of that split Donald Trump ultimately chooses is the side that wins. Donald Trump calls the shots for the MAGA movement. There's no real underlying set of principles that can't be overridden or can't be overruled by Trump himself when it's convenient for him. And I think that's why you're hearing a lot of quiet from the corner of the MAGA universe that was, quote unquote anti-war, that was like, attacking the forever war industry for years and years and years. You've got Tulsi Gabbard rolling over for this. Tucker Carlson's been quiet. And I think one of the things that they're doing is they're kind of waiting to see that first set of polls next week. Are there some significant subset of conservatives, of Republicans that are going to come along for this, that are going to buy the Trump's administration's story about it?
Yeah, it's notable to me that J.D. Vance went on NBC and he was like anticipating this kind of blowback. And he's like, I can understand why people would be wary of another war. But, this time we don't have a dumb president in charge. And this isn't going to be some long, drawn-out thing. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, well, do you control if it's a long, drawn-out thing now that you've made this move? I'm not sure.
I don't think that they do, right? You can see a path towards what they want, right? Which is, I think that they want Iran to sign a nuclear agreement on the Trump administration's terms that effectively forfeits Iran's ability to enrich uranium on Iranian soil. Do I think that's the most likely outcome here? No. But it is one of the only outcomes where Donald Trump and his allies would kind of control the fallout, and it depends on Iran not retaliating in the ways that Iran has promised that it would retaliate for many, many years if the United States undertook these actions.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about other countries, too. Like any other country who has any nuclear ambition, like what's your incentive for negotiating with the United States at all? Like, who do you believe in that negotiation?
It seems like the Trump administration wants the only incentive to be fear. Because if you look at the trajectory of events over the past decade, I think if you're in the Iranian leadership, you actually look back to like 2013, 2014, 2015, when the Iranian government engaged with the Obama administration and dramatically slowed down the march towards the ability to build a nuclear weapon in exchange for sanctions relief as part of the JCPOA. You now look back on that period as a massive lost opportunity, right? Like they may look at this as like, wow, we wasted years negotiating with an America that can't be trusted. We bled away time that we could have been using to actually build these weapons to give us a credible deterrent to prevent exactly what's happening right now. The same set of structural incentives for the Iranians to want nuclear weapons is not only still in place, it's worse.
For us, to be clear.
Right, yeah, it's worse for us, yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything Congress could do at this point to constrain Donald Trump if this conflict escalates?
Congress could refuse to appropriate the funding for ongoing military hostilities, right? Donald Trump, and he's not the first person to do this, Donald Trump has interpreted the War Powers Act as giving him more or less carte blanche to start hostilities. But even if you do that, right, the text of the War Powers Act is very clear. That's within 60 days, Congress needs to authorize the use of force in an ongoing military campaign. And Congress has repeatedly done that. There were authorizations for the use of military force after 9/11, one for Afghanistan and one for Iraq. We're still using them in a variety of ways. It's possible that the Trump administration could make an argument that the authorization for the use of military force against Iraq covers this.
Seems like a stretch. Not like they wouldn't try it, but it seems like a stretch.
It seems like a stretch, right? But like, so does the idea that Donald Trump can commit like literal crimes in broad daylight and the Supreme Court will sign off on it. So it's like, you can't blame them for thinking that they can push the envelope when they've done it again and again and they've gotten away with it. I think that there are probably hundreds of Republicans that are uncomfortable with what's happening. But when push comes to shove, it doesn't seem like there's very many willing to put their necks on the line politically to challenge the president.
David, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on the show, Mary. I really appreciate it.
David Faris is a political science professor at Roosevelt University. He's also a contributing writer for Slate. Earlier in this episode, you heard from Gregory Gause. He's a visiting scholar at the Middle East Institute and a professor emeritus at Texas A&M's Bush School of Government and Public Service. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. Say, hey, I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.